Welcome to Avoidant Decoded, where we break down the patterns behind love, distance, and emotional connection. If you're ready to understand relationships on a deeper level, consider joining our membership for more insights like this. If you're reading this, there's a good chance you're exhausted. You've spent nights overthinking every word, every pause, every change in tone. You've watched their messages slowly lose warmth, become shorter, more distant, and you've been searching for some kind of sign that you still matter. Part of you keeps hoping for that dramatic moment where everything becomes clear, where they finally say what you've been waiting to hear. But here's something difficult to accept. That moment you're waiting for might have already happened, and you missed it because it didn't look like love. It looked like tension. It looked like confusion. It may have even looked like things falling apart. Most relationship advice tells you to look for calm, consistency, and emotional safety. And that advice works when you're dealing with someone who is securely attached. But that's not the situation here. You're dealing with someone avoidant, and for them, everything works in reverse. What feels safe to you can feel suffocating to them. What feels like connection to you can feel like losing control to them. There's a specific shift that shows up in almost every serious dynamic with an avoidant person. It's the point where they actually start developing real feelings. Ironically, it's also the moment their partner starts believing everything is breaking down. That's because avoidant individuals don't fall in love in a soft, open way. They don't gently lean in, they react. Their system gets overwhelmed. Stay with this idea because it goes against instinct. What looks like rejection on the surface is often something much deeper underneath. It's not a lack of feeling, it's a reaction to feeling too much. When they pull away, it's not because you mean nothing, it's because you suddenly mean too much, and that triggers something they've spent years trying to avoid. To understand this, you have to look at how they've learned to function emotionally. For someone with a dismissive avoidant pattern, independence isn't just a preference, it's protection. At some point, they learned that relying on others leads to disappointment or pain. So they built a system where they depend only on themselves. They keep their emotions contained, controlled, and distant. That's their normal. Then you come into their life. In the beginning, everything feels easy. Early connection doesn't require deep vulnerability, so they can show up fully without feeling threatened. It's exciting, light, and manageable. You're still on the outside of their deeper emotional world. But as time passes, things naturally deepen. You share more, you connect more, you become part of their comfort. And that's when everything starts to change. You're no longer just someone they spend time with, you're someone they feel. And that's exactly what disrupts their internal balance. What often shows up first isn't distance, it's irritation. Suddenly, small things about you start bothering them. Things that never seemed to matter before now feel amplified. The way you speak, your habits, little details, it all becomes a source of tension. It's easy to interpret this as them losing interest, but that's not what's happening. This is their mind trying to create space. Underneath that behavior is a quiet fear. If they see you as someone truly important, then losing you would hurt in a way they don't know how to handle. So their mind starts trying to reduce your importance. They look for flaws, exaggerate imperfections, anything that helps them feel less attached. It's not about you being inadequate. It's about them trying to protect themselves from the impact of caring. They don't pull away because they want you out of their life. They pull away because they're trying to manage how much you affect them. Sometimes they even try to take control of the ending before anything can go wrong. Ending it themselves feels safer than risking being hurt unexpectedly. Then comes another layer, the emotional shutdown. Think about moments where things felt real between you, times when they opened up, or when there was genuine closeness. Those moments probably felt like progress, like you were finally connecting on a deeper level. But then, almost immediately after, they withdraw. They go quiet. Their energy changes. For you, that closeness meant trust. For them, it felt like exposure. It triggered a sense of vulnerability they're not used to handling. The next step for them is to retreat and rebuild their emotional distance. That silence you experience isn't empty. It's filled with internal conflict. They're trying to process something unfamiliar and uncomfortable. If they truly didn't care, they wouldn't need to step back like that. Indifference doesn't require distance. The intensity of their withdrawal often reflects the intensity of what they felt. The more it matters, the more they feel the need to pull away. This is why chasing them in those moments tends to backfire. When they feel overwhelmed, pursuit feels like pressure. It confirms their fear of losing control. What works instead is steadiness. Not withdrawal, not chasing, just consistency. Becoming something calm and reliable rather than something that adds to the pressure. Now, if you're dealing with a fearful avoidant, things can feel even more confusing. Unlike the dismissive type, they don't just detach, they fluctuate. They want closeness, but they're equally afraid of it. So they move toward you and away from you at the same time. When a fearful avoidant starts to develop real feelings, they often begin testing the relationship. These tests don't always make sense. They may create conflict where none exists, question your intentions, or suggest that you deserve someone else. On the surface, it might sound like they're being selfless, but that's not the full picture. When they say you deserve better, what they're really doing is creating a safe exit while secretly hoping you won't take it. It's a way of asking for reassurance without directly asking. They're revealing their fear of not being enough, but in a disguised form. They're trying to get ahead of rejection. Instead of waiting for you to eventually see their flaws and leave, they bring those fears to the surface early. It gives them a sense of control. But at the same time, there's a part of them hoping you'll stay anyway. If you walk away in those moments, it reinforces their belief that they're unlovable. But if you stay and respond with clarity, that you want them, not someone else, it can ease some of that fear. Still, it doesn't fix everything instantly, because then something else starts to happen. The connection begins to reflect things back to them. Your openness highlights their guardedness. Your honesty makes their avoidance more visible. Your consistency contrasts with their inner instability. And instead of feeling comforted by your presence, they can start feeling exposed by it. The more you care, the more it forces them to confront parts of themselves they've been avoiding. And that creates a different kind of discomfort, shame. Not because of anything you've done, but because they feel like they can't meet you at the same level. And when that feeling builds up, the instinct isn't always to grow, it's to escape. To step away from the mirror that's reflecting everything they're not ready to face. Understanding this doesn't mean you ignore your own needs, but it does change how you interpret their behavior. What looks like distance isn't always disinterest. What feels like rejection isn't always a lack of care. Sometimes it's the opposite. It's what happens when someone feels more than they know how to handle. They start arguments, point out your flaws, or create emotional distance, whatever it takes to stop feeling exposed by their own limits. That's often why things seem to fall apart, right when they were starting to feel real. They zoom in on your imperfections, sometimes exaggerating them, not because you suddenly changed, but because it helps them feel less vulnerable. If you're flawed too, then their emotional withdrawal doesn't feel as heavy by comparison. It's not about you being too much or overly sensitive. It's a defense pattern. And underneath that tension is someone quietly wondering if anyone can stay steady when things get difficult. They're not pushing you away because they want to lose you. They're trying to see if what you feel is strong enough to survive pressure. The question they never say out loud is simple. Can you handle me? Can you stay when I'm not easy, when I'm distant, when I don't show up the way you expect? Because in their mind, if you can't handle that version, then you can't truly handle them at all. At the same time, it's important to draw a clear line here. There's a difference between someone who pulls back because they're overwhelmed and someone who consistently disrespects you. This isn't about excusing bad behavior or tolerating emotional harm. The difference often comes down to intention and what happens afterward. Someone who is manipulative will tear you down to gain control and rarely shows genuine accountability. Someone avoidant, on the other hand, usually feels the weight of what they've done once the intensity passes, even if they struggle to express it directly. You might notice it in subtle ways: a random message after days of silence, a light-hearted meme, a small check-in that feels almost casual on the surface. But it's not meaningless. It's their way of reopening the door without having to fully explain themselves. A quiet signal that says, "I didn't disappear completely. Are you still there?" It may seem small, but for them, it's a step. So how do you know if someone is truly gone or just pulling back temporarily? Look at the pattern. not just a single moment. Consistent emotional absence usually means they're not invested. But if there's a cycle, closeness followed by distance, warmth followed by withdrawal, that points to something else. It shows there's an internal struggle happening. People don't wrestle with something that means nothing to them. If they didn't care, they would leave cleanly. No confusion, no push and pull. The fact that they remain, even while acting distant, often means they're caught in between. Not fully in, not fully out. That space can feel incredibly isolating to sit in. It's where uncertainty lives, but it's also where the deeper dynamics reveal themselves. Understanding all of this helps you make sense of their behavior, but it doesn't take away the emotional toll. Knowing they're scared doesn't make the silence easier. It doesn't stop you from questioning yourself. So the real question becomes, how do you respond in a way that protects you without making the situation worse? Most people react instinctively. When the other person pulls away, they move closer. When communication drops, they try harder. When things feel cold, they give more warmth. It feels logical, but in this kind of dynamic, it usually backfires. You can't ease someone's fear of closeness by overwhelming them with more of it. All that happens is you drain yourself while they retreat further. What works is something much less intuitive. When they step back, you don't chase. You stay where you are. Not to play games, not to manipulate, but to maintain your own stability. You allow space without abandoning yourself in the process. Think of it as holding steady rather than reacting. When they go quiet or distant, you resist the urge to send multiple messages, to over-explain, or to fix something that hasn't even been clearly defined. You don't take on blame just to restore temporary peace. Instead, you pause. And during that pause, the focus shifts back to you. Not as a distraction, but as a grounding point. Because even if you're not reaching out, your internal state still matters. If you're constantly checking your phone, waiting for them, replaying everything, you're still emotionally chasing. And that energy has a way of being felt, even without words. Avoidant individuals are often very sensitive to pressure, even subtle pressure. If they sense that you're waiting on them emotionally, it can feel like expectation, and expectation feels heavy to them. But when you genuinely return to your own life, spending time with others, engaging in your routines, actually being present in your own world, the dynamic begins to shift. The pressure disappears. The space becomes real. And within that space, something changes on their side too. They start to feel your absence, not as punishment, but as reality. And that's important, because someone can't miss you if you're always filling every silence. Giving space isn't about withdrawing love. It's about allowing your presence to have value. When you're always available, always reaching out, your energy becomes expected rather than appreciated. But when there's a natural pause, your presence becomes something they can feel the absence of. And yes, it can bring up fear. The thought that if you stop reaching out, they might forget you or move on. But that fear usually comes from your own emotional wiring, not from what's actually happening. People don't just erase meaningful connections because of a few days of space. They remember. They process. In fact, when you stop chasing, something shifts in how they see you. You stop appearing uncertain or dependent, and instead, you come across as grounded and self-assured. And that matters, because avoidant individuals tend to respect independence. They're drawn to people who feel steady in themselves. Eventually, if you hold that balance, they tend to come back. Not always in a dramatic way, but subtly. A simple message, something casual, just enough to reopen communication. And this is where many people lose their footing. The relief of hearing from them can lead to an emotional rush, over-explaining, expressing everything at once, seeking reassurance immediately. But that reaction can undo the balance you just created. It signals that despite everything, you were still waiting in the same place. A better approach is to match their energy. If they reach out simply, you respond simply. Warm, but composed. Friendly, but not overwhelming. You're not shutting them out. You're just not abandoning your center to meet them. You become steady. And steadiness creates safety. Not the kind that feels suffocating, but the kind that allows space without losing connection. That's the balance that slowly changes the dynamic, not by force, but by consistency. You're showing them something important without saying a word, that their distance didn't break you. And when they see that, it makes it easier for them to come back. There's no pressure to repair things immediately, no expectation they have to fix anything first. That lowers their defenses. But this part is critical. You can't stay stuck in this pattern forever. There's a larger truth here that can't be ignored. Understanding why someone pulls away is empathy. Allowing it to keep happening without limits is self-abandonment. Eventually, knowing the reason behind the hurt doesn't make it okay to keep experiencing it. So how do you move from just managing the cycle to actually changing it? You shift the dynamic through something called secure vulnerability. This is very different from emotionally unloading in the middle of frustration. It's intentional. It happens in a calm moment when you're both connected, not during conflict or while they're already withdrawing. And it sounds something like this. I really care about what we have. When things are good between us, they feel genuinely meaningful. But when you disappear for days without communication, it affects me. I'm not asking you to change who you are, but I also can't feel okay in something where I feel shut out. I want us to find a way where you can have space and I can still feel secure. Can we figure that out together? Pay attention to how that's structured. You start with appreciation, then name the behavior, then explain how it impacts you, then set a boundary, and finally, invite collaboration. There's no blame, no accusation, just a clear expression of your needs, held with the same weight as theirs. Their response will tell you a lot. If they react with defensiveness, dismiss your feelings, or shut down completely, that's not just avoidance, it's resistance to growth. But if they stay present, even if it's uncomfortable, and respond with something like, I don't really know how to do this, but I'm sorry, that's a meaningful shift. It shows they're willing to lean in, even if they don't have the tools yet. It means the relationship matters more to them than staying completely guarded. That's where real work can begin. That said, change won't happen overnight. These patterns are deeply wired, and they don't dissolve after one conversation. It takes consistency. When they do show up, even in small ways, acknowledge it. Let them know it matters. Something as simple as, I really appreciated that conversation, or I feel closer to you when you share like that, reinforces safety. Over time, that positive reinforcement helps reshape how they experience closeness. For them, intimacy has often been linked to pain. Your steadiness shows them it can also feel safe. It's important to understand the depth of what you're dealing with. You're not just responding to current behavior, you're up against years, sometimes decades of conditioning. Maybe it came from emotional neglect, criticism, or early betrayal. You can't see that history, but it's there, and you can't fight it with frustration. The only thing that works is consistency, not chasing, not overextending, but being steady and reliable. Think of it like this. You're a lighthouse. You don't run along the shore trying to guide ships. You stay where you are, grounded, with your light on. If they want safety, they'll move toward it. If they choose distance or chaos instead, that's not a reflection of your worth. You're not here to fix them. You're here to offer stability and warmth. And if they still can't meet you there, that speaks to where they are internally, not to any failure on your part. At a deeper level, their reaction to closeness often comes from a fear of losing themselves. For someone with this kind of attachment style, their independence feels like something they have to protect at all costs. Real intimacy requires letting someone in, and to them, that can feel less like connection and more like losing control. So when they pull away, it's not about rejecting you, it's about trying to regain a sense of safety. It's a survival response, not a personal attack. When you start to see it that way, your energy shifts. Instead of reacting with anger or hurt, you respond with calm understanding. And that matters because they can feel the difference. When there's less pressure, they don't feel like they're suffocating. And when they feel like they can breathe, they're more capable of coming closer. There's another pattern that often shows up during these moments, the sudden mention of a past relationship. They might say things like, "My ex never needed this much from me," or bring up old memories in a way that makes it seem like they're still emotionally tied to that person. It can feel like you're being compared, like you're competing with someone who isn't even there. But what's really happening isn't about that person. It's about distance. An ex who's no longer present doesn't make demands, doesn't require vulnerability, doesn't challenge their independence. That relationship becomes an idealized version of safety because it exists in memory, not reality. You, on the other hand, are real. You're present. You have needs, and that feels riskier. So don't try to compete with a memory. You won't win, because memories don't have flaws in the same way real relationships do. Instead, gently ground things in reality. You might say, I understand you have a past, and I'm not trying to take that away, but I'm here now, wanting something real with you. If you'd rather stay focused on what's behind you, I can't change that, but it means missing what's right in front of you. Then leave it there. Let them sit with that choice. Avoidant people resist pressure, but they respond when they feel like they have autonomy. You're not forcing anything, you're simply making your position clear. I want this, but only if you do too. That's not an ultimatum, it's a standard. And then comes the hardest truth. What if you show up consistently, communicate clearly, give space, stay grounded, and nothing changes? That has to be faced honestly. Sometimes the pattern runs too deep, sometimes they're not ready, and sometimes the most caring thing you can do is step away. Not out of anger, not to punish them, but because you're choosing to accept reality instead of fighting it. You can love someone deeply and still recognize that you can't heal them, and you shouldn't lose yourself trying. Walking away doesn't mean you failed. It means you respected yourself enough to stop accepting something that hurts, and in many cases, it's also the only thing that forces them to confront their own patterns. As long as you stay and tolerate inconsistency, nothing truly challenges them to change. They still get connection without doing the inner work. When that's no longer available, they're left alone with the consequences of how they show up. And for many people, that's what finally creates awareness. Losing someone who truly cared can become the moment that pushes them to grow. So leaving isn't giving up. It's a final act of clarity. You're choosing yourself, and you're also allowing them the space to face themselves without you absorbing the impact of their avoidance. Real healing comes from honoring both your compassion and your boundaries at the same time. You can understand someone's fear of closeness without sacrificing your own need for consistency and emotional safety. True connection only grows when both people are willing to meet in that space, even imperfectly. And if they can't, walking away isn't failure. It's choosing self-respect while giving them the chance to face themselves. Sometimes the most powerful love is knowing when to stay steady and when to finally let go.